Shabbat Shalom, once again. At this point in the year, we are finishing the book of Genesis, and those of you who have been with us coming to services regularly for the past 2 months know that there is a lot of material in there that's exciting, iconic texts. It is the most emotional book of the Torah, and as I sort of alluded to as I set up the Torah reading just a moment ago, the verse I chanted, or among the verses that I chanted just now this morning, offers us a glimpse of that. We've got intrigue, deception, sex, jealousy, and fear, so many different plot devices. Genesis has it all. But running through it all, like a scarlet thread, is an emotional motif that is simpler, maybe even more relatable than all the rest of that drama. And that is the motif of tears. On Rosh Hashanah, we read of Hagar's weeping once Abraham cast her away from his house. Then it's Abraham's turn, weeping over the death of Sarah. Jacob cries when he first embraces Rachel, then cries again when he hears that Joseph has been killed. Even Esau, the burly, strong man of the house of Abraham, cries when he's reconciled with his brother Jacob. And here, in this week's Parsha, followed by next week, we read of more tears than ever before in the story of Joseph. This week, we read of the fruits of Joseph's labors as vizier to the Pharaoh. He had predicted the 7 years of famine that would befall the region and had worked to build stockpiles of grain in anticipation. Hearing that there were stores of grain in Egypt, Joseph's brothers travel there, where they encounter Joseph after all these years, that section of text that we just read. And there he is in charge of the agricultural program and fully disguised as an Egyptian leader. We know what comes next. Joseph doesn't reveal his identity when they come to him asking to buy grain, but he insists that they bring their youngest brother Benjamin to Egypt before receiving what they had requested. Eventually they agree, and Joseph hears them say to one another that this must be some kind of punishment for how they had treated their long-lost brother Joseph so long ago. And at this moment, Joseph cries. More specifically, the text says, "Vayisov me'alehem vayevk." He turned away from them and he cried. He turned away from them, which makes sense because as an important Egyptian official, he wouldn't want to show his weakness, and because he wouldn't want to expose himself as their brother. It's a recognizable move, turning away from others to avoid showing them that we are suffering, hiding our deepest vulnerabilities from the public. Surely all of us have had some kind of similar experience in our own lives. And the text's inclusion of this moment makes it all the more real and relatable. That verb, vayisov, and he turned, is a rare verb. It appears only one other time in the Joseph narrative, and that's in last week's Parsha. In a first dream, in Joseph's first dream, when he imagined his brothers' sheaves of wheat, one day encircling and turning around his own sheaf of wheat. That dream presaged this exact moment when Joseph's brothers would turn to him for grain. And you may recognize the sound of this verb, vayisov, from sevivon, the Hebrew word for dreidel, a spinning top that turns around and around. In the next chapter, Joseph does the same thing all over again. When his brothers return with Benjamin, the text says, "And Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother, and he sought a place to cry." Again, he can't bear to be vulnerable with his brothers. He ran away from them, ki nichmaru rachamav, because he was overcome with feeling. Rashi explains this word nichmaru to mean that he was enkindled with emotion. Comparing this word to other usages in rabbinic texts, Rashi says that in this moment, Joseph was enkindled as though by an oven, like something wrinkling when it catches fire. In both of these moments, we see Joseph turning away in order to have a private moment of emotion. so as not to betray his vulnerability to those around him. And in both of these sections of text, we get an echo of Hanukkah, turning away like a spinning top, like a dreidel, because the feeling was enkindled so brightly within him, like the flames of menorah. These are the two examples of Joseph's crying in this week's Parsha, and it seems fitting then that we typically read Parshat Mikeitz during Hanukkah each year. But shortly thereafter, in next week's portion, there is a tonal shift. Joseph continues to cry, but there it's something a little bit different. In chapter 45, the text says, Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." Now, you might think this is just typical Joseph melodrama, but here he is not addressing his brothers, but everyone in his court. The verse continues to say that he asked his courtiers to leave, so there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. He finally reveals his true identity to them, and this time he cries right in front of them. First, he cries before Benjamin, and then he kisses all his brothers and weeps some more. It is the grand climax of the Joseph narrative. As Rabbi David Kasher points out, this cry is different. He's not seeking to be alone. He does not turn away. He does try to remove his staff, but no matter, they will hear him anyway. Everyone will hear him. He's making himself known. And right then, he says the iconic words, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Finally, he's able to be honest. And this time, his tears are not the tears of someone holding things back. The Talmud in Tractate Brachot teaches that after the destruction of the temple, many of you know this, the heavenly gates of prayer were locked, and prayers could not be accepted as they once were. But the gates of tears remained open, and one who cries before God can rest assured that her tears will be answered. Perhaps because when one stops fighting their tears, all that is left is honesty, the rawness of human emotion, the truth of being alive. We pray for all kinds of things all the time, especially in synagogue, and who really knows if our prayers will ever be answered? But when we cry, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, when we can't help but share deep truths, these are moments of undeniable holiness. These are moments when we can feel the presence of something big and ineffable that might feel remote to us during the rest of our lives. And when we're vulnerable enough to cry, we give ourselves the ability to see and be seen in precisely the ways that many of us hope for when we pray. Hanukkah is a holiday when we don't really like to think about being vulnerable. It's a holiday that rejoices in the strength of the Jewish people against all odds. No wonder, then, that Hanukkah is the holiday when the reading focuses on Joseph turning away and being enkindled with emotion, privately projecting strength. But lest we get too cocky, the continuation of the Joseph tale comes to remind us that in the end, it's only when we're vulnerable with people that we can actually access real truths. Only then can healing begin. And only then can light really begin to penetrate the darkness. Shabbat Shalom.